So when we're dealing with rational expressions, we need to make sure we know the factors, because times, divide, and fractions are all lots to do with factors. So to do this, we want to factor this, but before we do this, we need to make sure we state restrictions. So x cannot be equal to anything dividing by 0. So I'm going to be dividing by that x plus 2, so it can't equal negative 2. I'm dividing by that x plus 1, so I can't equal negative 1. Okay, so those are two restrictions. I'm going to factor the rest here. So I'm going to get x minus 7, x plus 2. This factors to x plus 1, x plus 2. I'm going to check for some more factors, but these factors are already restrictions. So I'm going to go ahead, instead of dividing, I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal. Okay. So multiplying by the reciprocal here just puts the times and divides in the right spot. So this is divide by x plus 2, so that should go on the bottom. This is divide by x plus 1, so that should go on the top. So I can see that there's some factors cancel out. And as long as I've stated my restrictions, I can cancel out those times factors, and it has to be times, it can't be plus. If we have any pluses, we can't cancel things out. So those are all times. So all I'm left with on the top is x minus 7 on top, and then x plus 2 on the bottom. Okay, so there it is. So there's my, that looks like a negative, that's not a negative x. So same thing here, I want to state my restrictions. So I'm going to factor first in this case. So I'm going to go x minus 2, x minus 2. On the bottom here, it looks like I have plus 3 plus 2, x plus 3, x plus 2. Okay, so times, so everything, all the times are on top where I want them. All the divides are on the bottom where I want them. Okay, and this is going to factor to, I'm just going to do my little grid here. It's got a 2x squared, so 2x squared minus 21, so that's going to be negative 42x squared. So multiplying to negative 42 and adding to negative 1, it should be 7 and 6. Okay, so when I factor this, I get 2x minus 7. This is going to be x, looks like plus 3. So it's going to be plus 6x, right? Just double checking. Yeah, that looks right. So then my factors in the numerator here are going to be 2x minus 7 and an x plus 3 factor. Okay, so now I have to, anywhere I'm dividing, I have to state my restriction. So I don't need to worry about this plus minus 2 up here, but this minus 2 down here is a restriction. Okay, so I'm going to have x cannot equal negative 3, negative 2, positive 2. Okay, those are my three divisors. Okay, now once I've stated my restrictions, I can start getting rid of some of my factors. So that times by x minus 2, divide by x minus 2 cancels. Times by x plus 3, divide by x plus 3 cancels. And it looks like that's all there is that's going to cancel. Now, some people like to multiply this out, but really it's probably best to leave it in factored form. Okay, the factored form is usually going to be more useful. Sometimes it's better to multiply it out, but for the more often than not, the factored form is going to be more useful because we can see the factor or times pieces, which then allows us to do more simplification to it. Okay, so there it is. Again, my restrictions need to be stated at the beginning, so make sure that you're stating those restrictions. Okay, so this one here, we're going to add and subtract. So even with adding and subtracting, we still need to know the factors in the denominator because we're going to use those factors to get a common denominator. So I need to factor. So I end up with x plus 2, x plus 3, plus This is going to factor to x plus 3, x plus 1. Okay, so common denominator involves both fractions having all the same factors. So if I look at the first fraction, it's missing an x plus 1 factor. So it really needs an x plus 1 factor in the denominator. But if I do something to the bottom, I'm going to change the fraction. So I don't want to change the fraction, so I'm going to make sure I balance the top. This guy's looking over this side and he's saying, well, I'm missing an x plus 2. So he gets himself an x plus 2. And you've got to make sure that both the top and bottom are done the same. Otherwise, we change the value of the fraction, which then means we're doing a problem that we're not even been asked to do. So once I've done that, I've got my common denominator. I'm not going to multiply this out. I'm just going to leave it in factored form. But I should combine my like terms in the numerator. So I'm just going to make sure that I don't have any like terms in the denominator. So the minus 5 plus 2 is minus 3x's. And then minus 5 times plus 2. Okay, so there's my numerator. I can simplify a little bit, and I'm not going to do anything other than just keep track of my denominator now. Okay, there are some like terms, there are some terms that cancel out, so I end up with x squared plus 3 minus 10, so minus 7 on top. That doesn't factor, so we're just going to leave that. X plus 1, x plus 2, x plus 3. Okay, and I forgot to state my restrictions, but since I'm not canceling anything, it's pretty easy to find my restrictions. My restrictions are going to be not equal to 1, not equal to 2, and not equal to 3, which is all the factors in my common denominator. So this one here, same thing, we're subtracting this time. So we have to be a little bit careful when we're subtracting, because that subtract, we have to remember we're going to subtract everything on the other side of that. So I'm going to factor first. So I'm going to factor out my 5x here. And I'm going to be left with an x plus 2. Here I'm going to end up with x, so minus 3 plus 2. Minus, there's my x minus 2. That's going to be minus 1 minus 3. Okay, so if I were to get a common denominator now, I'd have to multiply this by x minus 1 on the left side, multiply this one by x plus 2. Now, there's a much easier way out of this, because if we're adding fractions, we really should simplify the fractions first. Ooh, forgot to do my restriction. So x not equal to 3, negative 2, and 1. Okay, but when I add or subtract fractions, before I do that, I should simplify my fractions first. So notice that this fraction simplifies to 5x over x minus 3. Now that it's simplified, I don't need the x plus 2 in my denominator. There's nothing I need to put into this fraction over here. I just need to get an x plus 2 denominator in here and multiply the top by x plus 2. And the expression that I end up with is much simpler. Oh, sorry, that's not x plus. I need an x minus 1. And the expression I end up with is going to be much simpler than if I had to multiply all that out. So this is a much easier equation to do. Now, it's not wrong if you forget to do this. Now, it's just you're dealing with a much bigger denominator, and you're going to have to factor at the end, which is going to be sometimes very hard. Okay, so this is way easier to simplify first. Okay, so we end up with 5x squared minus 5x minus, and I make sure you put it into brackets whenever I have a minus, because it's going to be minus x minus minus 2. So that's actually really a plus 2. Okay, so there's my common denominator, x minus 1, x minus 3, x plus 2. Okay, combining my like terms. Remember, this is going to be plus 2. Okay, and then this ends up being x minus 1, x minus 3, x plus 2. And the numerator does not factor, so this is my final answer. And those are my restrictions.